Today I'm going to be showing you how to do grid-based movement with the new input system in Unity 2020. And this will be using the ऊKenney RPG Urban Pack. It's available for free to download on their website, and you can use it in a commercial game. Alright, so let's get started. So I have done a little bit of pre-work here. If this is not a 2D project, you have to make sure to download a couple packages from Unity, which you can go to the Package Manager by pressing Window, Package Manager, and you can go to Packages, Unity Registry, and I downloaded the 2D Sprite package as well as the 2D Tilemap Editor package. And we need these two for the project, as well as the input system. So make sure to download that. So just search up input system and then download this one down here, just press download, and when the pop-up comes up to confirm that you want to restart the editor, just click yes. The first thing I've done is import the ऊKenney asset pack. So right here I have the tilemap that is imported with the asset pack, and so I changed the texture type to sprite, 2D, and UI. I also changed the sprite mode to multiple because there are multiple tiles in this tilemap. And then be sure to put the pixels per unit to 16 since it's a 16 by 16 tile, and make sure to put the filter mode to point and the compression to none. Because this is pixel art, they recommend no filter to preserve maximum quality. Then I went to the sprite editor and I divided the tile sets in order to get each individual tile. And so you just do that by going to slice, and then I set the type to grid by cell size. And here are the variables that you need to enter. The pixel size is 16 by 16 and the padding is 1 by 1, and that just means the padding between the tiles. As you can see, there's a bit of padding here, and the size is 1 to get it exact. And you just click slice and then apply, and it will apply it for you. Cool, and so I have a video already detailing how to make tile maps in Unity that I'll link down in the description since this is not a tile map video. So feel free to watch that if you want to learn more about tile maps. One last thing I did is made a sprite atlas. You see these lines here on the game. That's caused because there's a little spacing between the tiles, and so a sprite atlas automatically fixes that. And so you just right click and create sprite atlas right here. And then I kept all the settings as the same, except I put the filter mode to point and the compression to none, just as in the tilemap. And then I just added in the tilemap object, this one. And you just click Pack Preview. If it's not letting you pack the preview, then be sure to go to Edit Project Settings Editor. And you have to make sure to enable here in the Sprite Packer the mode to always enabled. If you start a 3D game, it comes as disabled, so you want to make sure you enable the Sprite Atlas. Alright, getting to the actual meat of the tutorial, I've made a grid, which is just a normal 2D grid, not isometric. And then I have two tile maps. So I have the ground tile map, and I'll disable the other one so you can see what's happening. So the ground tile map is the area that we want our player to be able to travel on, and it constitutes mostly the floor. Then I made another tile map, and this constitutes the areas where we don't want the player to be traveling on, so kind of like our collision with the environment. So as you can see, we don't want the player to travel into the fountain, we don't want the player to crash with the tree, and we actually don't want the player to go out from this area, so I covered the area with trees. And so of course you can change that to your liking. Be sure to add these things to your tile map. So first I added a tilemap collider 2D. You just go down here, add component, tilemap collider 2D, and you just keep the settings the same. You want to make sure to press use by composite here. And you also want to add in a composite collider 2D. And you should add that because the tilemap collider makes a collider per tile, and this just groups all those colliders together to save on performance. Lastly, it automatically adds a rigid body 2D, and you have to make sure to freeze the position and freeze the rotation, because if you don't, it will start flying off when you start the game, since it will be affected by physics, and we don't want our tile map to be affected by physics. But Unity needs this rigid body 2D in order to work with the colliders. And you do that for both the ground and the column. You can actually select both of them and do them both at the same time, and it will work perfectly. One last thing is that in the tilemap render, the ground is sorted on the default layer with an order of 0, and the colliders are on the default layer with a order of 1. So that just means that they're on the same layer, but since the trees and the water have a higher order layer, it will be rendered in front of the other layers below it. So that means that the trees and the waters will always be rendered in front of the ground, which is exactly what we want. We have to specify these values to make sure Unity renders it correctly and doesn't get confused. Alright, so let's make the input system. So go into your scripts folder, right click, create input actions, and let's call this player movement. And I already have several videos on the input system, so if you're interested in checking those out, then I'll link those in the description because I'm not going to be explaining exactly everything about the input system in this video. Alright, so let's add in a new action map, and I'm just going to call this the main action map. Next we want to add in an action, and that's just a control that we want to add. And so we can specify up here with the plus button, and let's add in the new action, and let's just call it movement. So we want a movement action, and then we have to set the action type, so what kind of action it is. And we actually have to set it to either value or pass through, because this is not a button, this is a 2D vector that we want to be returning for the WASD or arrow key movement. So you can set it to whatever you want. I'm just going to set it to pass through because this just reads the value from any incoming controls, while value determines which control you're actually on and sets that control to be the main control. In this case, you can just select pass through, value would work as well. And then select the control type to vector2. Then we want to add in a binding and add in a 2D vector composite. And let's just call this the WASD. And then we want to add in our controls for the respective directions. So for the up, we want to add in the W. So just click path and then listen and W. Down, we want to add in S, listen S. Left, we want to add in an A for the arrow key. And right, we want to add in D. You can also add in another 2D vector composite and just put the arrow keys for that one and assign the appropriate values to your arrow keys, up, down, left, and right. But I'm just going to delete that. And so that's actually all the controls we need for this video. However, there's a couple things that we want to add here in our movement. So we want to add in an interaction. And there's a couple of interactions we can add, and that just determines when this control is actually getting executed. So if we only want to execute this movement when we hold down on the button, then we can press hold. There's also multi-tap, press, slow tap, and tap. These are awesome for mobile devices as well. In this case, we just want to be pressing a button, and it automatically comes with a couple values here. So there's a trigger behavior, so press only. So this is when you press down on the button. So this press is used for kind of like a button-like behavior. So that means the function will only execute if you press it down, or you can do it on release only, or you can do it when you press it and then you release it. In this case, we want to do it when we press down on the button. You can do it when you release it. It depends on what your preferences are. And then the press point is the magnitude of how hard you press on the button. So it will only be considered a press if you press on it harder than 0.5. And this goes from a scale from 0 to 1. And this is mostly used for gamepads, triggers, and joysticks when you have a variable amount of pressure on the button. And that value can be between 0 and 1. In this case, since we're on a keyboard, 0.5 is the perfect value since we're only pressing it down. And it's also the default value. So let's just keep it as that. If you want to set it, you can also do that if you're working with gamepads. And one last thing we want to add in the processors, so there's a couple things you can do to process that value after it's been read from the input. You can invert the value, normalize scale, or you can do kind of a dead zone. In this case, we want to normalize the value to make sure it's 0 or 1. We don't want to have a half value like 0.7 and 0.7, which you get when you press two buttons at the same time, like the A and the S. Alright, so let's just save that asset. And then we can click the asset and generate a new C# script, and you just click apply, and that'll generate our script that we can use in our other player controller script. Alright, and then now that we have our script generated, we can right click and create our new C# script, which is called player controller, and this will actually be the controller where we read in our input values and then determine what to do with those values. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is enable our input system. So we can say private player movement controls, and then in our awake function we can say controls equals new player movement. So we have to initialize our controls, then we have to do an onEnable function and we have to enable our controls, so controls.enable, and you have to do this with the new input system. And finally we have an onDisable function where you have to disable the controls whenever this script is disabled. Alright, and I'm just going to delete this update function since we don't need it. And then we actually have to read in our values whenever we move. So we can do that by saying controls.main.movement.perform. So whenever we perform this movement value, or whenever we press it, then we want to get the context to that value. So this will allow us to get the value that we're pressing down. And then we can call a function that we're about to make. So let's make a move function, and let's just say it down here, private void move, and we want to be passing in a vector2, with our direction, which is the WASD. So right here in the move, we can pass in context.readValue, and then we can pass in a vector2 for what we want to read. You have to specify what you want to be reading. All right, so this is just the event syntax. So every time this is performed, we're subscribing to that event and we're getting that value and passing it into our move function so that we can do something with it. All right, now that we have that, we want to actually move the player. All right, so for the tile maps, remember that we have 2 tile maps to determine how we want to move. So we can make a function that can actually determine if we can move or not, and it will return a Boolean. So can we move to that direction? And we're gonna pass in that direction. And let's just pass in that vector2 direction. So in this can move function, we'll say, can we move to that tile map? And we actually have to get the grid position first, depending on our direction. So we have to get where we want to move, and then we have to check that position if it's already occupied by a tree or a fountain or something that we don't want to move on. So to do that, we actually have to import the tilemaps namespace. So using Unity engine.tilemaps, and then tilemaps only accept a vector3 int, which makes sense because it's a grid and it's made up of integer values. So we have to convert our position to a vector3 int. So let's say grid position equals, and then we need a reference to our tile map in order to convert that position into the grid position with the vector3 int. So let's go back up here and say private tile map, ground tile map, and let's also do one for the collision tile map. And let's make sure to make both of those a serialized field so we can access it in the editor and assign those values. And so we want to get a reference to both of them because we want to check if we can actually move there on the ground. So we want to check if the ground exists. And then we also want to check if on that position there isn't any collisions. All right, so back down in the move function, we can say ground tile map dot world to cell. So we're converting a world position to a cell position. And then we can say transform dot position plus direction. So all we're doing here is we're getting the current transform position and we're adding in the direction. And remember, the direction is a vector2 between the values of 0 and 1. So the x can be between 0 and 1 and the y can be between 0 and 1. And so adding in that direction to our current position makes it equal our destination that we want to go to. But currently we can't add them together because the direction's a vector2 and the transform position is a vector3. So let's just quickly fix that. So we can actually cast the direction vector into a vector3 by putting parentheses vector3 in front of direction, and it will convert it to a vector3 where the z-axis is 0. So exactly what we want, since we don't want to be moving on the z-axis. So now that we have our grid position, we can check if we can move there. So if the ground does not have a tile at that position, we don't want to move there. So if ground tile map dot has tile at the grid position, then we can return false. And remember, the exclamation point at the front is a negation. So if it has a tile, we do want to move there, but in this case, it's negated. So if it doesn't have a tile, then this will execute and it will return false. Else we want to return true, but we also want to make sure that there's no collisions there. So in the if statement up here, so if it does have a ground tile, it will continue to evaluate this if expression. So we can say, or the collision tile map has a tile, and we put in that same position, then we don't want to move there. So if either the ground does not exist or the ground does exist, but there's a collision there, then we don't want to move there. Else return true that we can move there. All right, and in our move function, we can just say if we can move, and we pass in our direction, then we can just say transform.position plus equals, and let's cast that to a vector3 once again, and let's pass in that direction. And why are we just adding in this direction? Well, because this value is a 0 or a 1, and with tile maps, each cell size is 1 unit size. So if we click on the grid object, for example, it has a cell size of 1 and 1, meaning that each cell here is a 1 by 1 square. And so if we're in the center of this square, all we have to do is move 1 unit to the right, and then we'll be in the center of the other square. And same with the y-axis. And so that's actually all we need to do for grid-based movement. in our player, which I just added an empty game object with a sprite renderer, and I just added in this sprite that came with the asset pack. I'm gonna add in our component called player controller, and all we have to do is grab in our ground tile map and put it into that player controller, and also we have to drag in our collision tile map and drag it into that player controller. And now once we click play, you'll see that these lines disappear when we click play due to the sprite asset. And then we can just move in a grid-like fashion. And see, we can't move above these trees, we can't move into that trash can because that's on the collision tile map, and we can't move into this water area as well. And what's nice about it is that with the input system, we specified that we only want it when we press down on that value. And so if you didn't specify that, then you would be able to spam the value and just go super fast. But since we added that, it's only limited to how fast we can actually press the button. But if you're really amazing at pressing the buttons, then you can go super fast. Like that. Well, that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I want to thank all my Patreon supporters. They help make these kind of videos possible. If you're interested in supporting me on Patreon, the link is on the description. I offer several benefits such as a Discord chat, source code for my videos, and early access to my videos. And if you aren't already in my Discord channel, I highly recommend joining, as we have a help channel that you can post any questions on, and you can also chat there. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you next time.